Pollok is a so-called deprived area on the south side of Glasgow, and in the early 90s it scored high in the tables for social deprivation across Europe. In Pollok, violence was a part of daily life. Even just a simple trip to the shop around the corner was a risk to your safety and pride. There were varying degrees of violent threat to consider, from scuffles to proper fighting, and different qualities of violence to fear, such as fistfights or stabbing. What didn't change was the constant awareness of aggression and the potential for it to escalate. In a community like this, the threat of violence is so pervasive that even when there is no reason to be afraid, the state of hypervigilance keeps you on alert regardless, making daily life considerably stressful. Outside of the home, in the school, violence was more like a public exhibition. People staved off the threat of violence by stoking it up for someone else. Whipping the playground into a frenzy until the first blow was struck.
They walk beside us every day.
Whether at home or in the street, faced with the threat of violence, you will experience the worst possible type of fear. Physically fighting is a horrible, terrifying and dangerous thing to do. I learned early in my life that violence was inevitable. And that I had no choice in the matter. So I picked my fights wisely if given the opportunity, earning my stripes in primary school with a boy I fought so many times that eventually people stopped coming to watch. In the midst of so many potential threats, it's not easy to express yourself unless you're being aggressive. Most other forms of emotional expression are kept in check, either by mockery or the threat of violence. This makes growing up in a so-called deprived community an oppressive experience. This sense that you are being repressed extends to nearly every means that you have to express your individuality, which is why nearly everybody dressed and spoke the same. If you didn't conform to the prevailing norm of the day, then life became a daily run of the gauntlet.
When you lose someone you love, you get an angel, you know.
Just as you'd attract attention for having the gall to wear a pair of trousers with more than 2 pockets, it became very apparent to other people if you started dropping fancy words into conversation. The conflict seemed to concentrate my mind, just like fear. And the things that upset me, just like traumatic experiences, became a form of fuel.
Look for the rainbow.
Even mental illness and problems in my personal life didn't stop me from pursuing my lines of inquiry and going after my targets.
It's hard to forget someone who gave you so much to remember.
I followed my instincts, right or wrong, despite the fact I could sense resistance to the message I was transmitting. Eventually, like the books and poems teachers tried to make me read, I began to take an adversarial attitude towards the people and organisations I believed were trying to influence how I thought and spoke about these issues. I began to lash back against anybody I felt was manipulating me, either to pacify my criticism or to extract narrative or data for their own agendas. My story, which I had been conditioned to retell like a party piece, got me so far, and then people became wary of me, aggravating my sense of rejection and exclusion. But I was also learning that the emotional damage that growing up in poverty had done to me made it that much harder for me to engage with the very people deployed to help me. I often projected my pain, mistrust, and sense of exclusion onto people who really did mean well. I was never quite sure if my instincts were right or if I was in the grip of an episode of mania. What I soon learned was that, no matter your background, you are cast out the second you offend the people who are in charge of your empowerment. Sometimes it's a person, other times it's an organisation. Sometimes it's a movement, and other times it's a political party. But the minute you start telling your story in service of your own agenda and not theirs, you're discarded. Your criticism is dismissed as not being constructive. Your anger is attributed to your mental health problems, and everything about you that people once applauded becomes a stick they beat you with. Look out for these people. The people who pay wonderful lip service to giving the working class a voice, but who start to look very nervous whenever we open our mouths to speak.